Hey guys, I've just woken up, so if I'm a bit, bleary-eyed and not making too much sense, then please forgive me. Also, I think um, I think things may be fairly serious, which is why I want to talk about them. And you may say, "No, I don't think it's serious at all," and then that's your opinion, right? I just think this does warrant certainly my attention, and I think we need to pay attention and see where this goes. Obviously, I hope it doesn't go anywhere, and I hope that I'm wrong, and I hope that we can, couple of days, weeks, or months from now, pay attention to something else. But um, I kind of want to share the things that I've been looking at with you guys. I've been learning, for example, about tactical nuclear weapons, Russia's arsenal versus America's arsenal. That alone shocked me. I was like, okay, something I've just found out, not like right now, but in the last day. We're going to be talking about day 223 of the invasion, but we're also going to be talking about what we're talking about when we're talking about nuclear weapons. For example, the weapon used on Hiroshima, I think, was 18 kilotons. Russia's tactical nuclear weapons are 10 times bigger, 10 times bigger than that, 170 kilotons. So if something does happen, you can anticipate it being incredibly destructive, right? So that's really where I'm coming from. We're trying to get to know the context, really, get to know what we are talking about. It's almost like this idea of there's someone out there that might want to commit a murder. Let's try and get to know him. Let's get to know the circumstances. Let's get to know his psychology. And if we're wrong, then that's great, right? Of course, it's not one murder, it's the murder of millions, maybe even more. So it's like, should you try and find out who this person is? That's really where I'm coming from, right? You see what I'm saying? Um, and I think it's a worthwhile use of my time, and I'm pleased to see that 91% of you think the same thing. If you're coming in and you haven't voted, make sure that you do. Just FYI, I am going to be doing a couple of other things on this channel. We'll be doing Jeffrey Dahmer. We'll be doing a review of the Gabby Petito story. It's an in-depth review, so like what all the things they got wrong and some of the factual things. So it's not just it was a good movie. It's kind of an in-depth review. And then we're also going to look at TCRS Book Club. That'll probably be later today, my time, where I am. It's 10 past 6 in the morning on the 5th. So it's day 224 here. But basically, it'll be, yeah, Thursday your time, which is, I guess, tomorrow if you're in America. So that is what we're going to be touching on. So I'm going to take you guys through some of the latest headlines, and then we're going to have, I think, an interesting conversation about Putin in a way that I haven't seen very often. So that's really what we're going to do. I just want to greet you guys. Karina, who's in Austria, good to see you. Helena, formerly known as Sunflowers, good to see you. Zircon, um, Lorley says North Korea testing long-range missiles over Japan the other day, then Russia moving a nuclear train and position very alarming. Um, Let me highlight that comment. So I think that's maybe a good place to start. Uh, I see some of the comments I'm getting. They're saying you've been very alarmist and you're falling for every story. I actually lived in South Korea for about 5 years, 4 or 5 years, and while I lived there, North Korea often fired off ballistic missiles. They did ballistic missiles tests. And because you were like literally right across the border, I mean, Seoul is very, very close to the border of North Korea. So I kind of got quite used to what really was saber rattling, kind of saber rattling with nuclear weapons to some extent, because they would often, the rhetoric coming out of North Korea has always been extremely belligerent and, um, invoking the use of nuclear weapons. And nothing ever came of it, right? I was in South Korea from 2000 to about 2005. Um, yeah, a little bit, 2001 to 2005, somewhere around there. And so nothing ever happened. So I've actually lived through that sort of thing enough to say, yeah, that's not, it's concerning, but I wouldn't really lose any sleep. I wouldn't put it that way. I wouldn't be too concerned about it. Not ignore it, but don't give up your day job, sort of thing. I don't think this is the same thing as that. I don't think this is the same. You've already got an invasion of a country, right? And there are all sorts of contextual things taking place right now that are of concern. For example, the Nord Stream attack, which we're going to deal with. So just to be explicit about my position, I first thought Russia did that. Then I thought America did that based on that clip of Biden. Then I thought it could be a NATO decision. And now I believe Russia was behind that to begin with, right? And again, you can say, no, I think it's actually America. And you can believe whatever you like, but the psychology, remember, Putin is a ex-KGB. That psychology plays into what's going on. Somebody wants to escalate all of this and somebody doesn't. If you follow the narrative, you can see Europe doesn't want it to escalate. America doesn't want it to escalate. Most of us don't want it to escalate. Ukraine wants to take back their country, so you could say they are escalating it to de-escalate it, I guess. But Russia seems to want to escalate. This is about Russia trying to make itself great again, right? So I think that's where you've got to do the whole lie detector test with Putin and say, is this the kind of guy who bluffs? And basically just who is he? Let's get to know this person. Let's look at some of your comments. Laura Lee says, I think he's flexing, showing off power hungry. North Korea, yeah. But the question is Putin. Manchu says people are being pushed, and when pushed, they act unreasonably. Laura Lee says they announced plans to build a nuclear reactor today in Southern Virginia. Surya, I think you're in Australia, says Putin rides with the biggest biker gang in Russia. Okay, that's interesting. Snaggy says, I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan. North Korea was constantly firing. Yeah, absolutely. It's not really anything that's so new. But the question is this different? Is this different? Sorry, I'm just trying to look for. So this really shocked me, and that's why I put the background. It's from this Financial Times article. They're kind of not asking if Russia's going to do something. They're asking which weapons are they going to use. That's from the Financial Times. It's not The Sun or some sort of obscure publication. This is a really sober publication, and look at the imagery there. Putin with binoculars, you often see when there are nuclear tests. I remember this with Kim Jong-un. Also, when they're testing weapons, bring up the binoculars, you see missiles going up in the air, it's that whole thing. This is now being explicitly shown on a publication like the Financial Times. And it's not just there either, it's other publications as well. So the mainstream media has started taking a different turn. And I know there are a lot of people who say, I don't really care what the mainstream media says. I do. And I don't think it's all the elements that are not accurate, but there's also elements that are. And the overall thing is this: it's just be curious. Let's try and find out what's going on here. Is that okay? Is it okay to think about this? So that's really what we're trying to do. Mary Rose says, I'm 80-20 that he'll use nukes. Does that mean 80% that he will, or 80% that he won't? Laura says, I don't want to fight with Russia. Kelly Sharp, good to see you here. He seems void of feelings for me. Anissa says, not one of us should ever turn our backs on evil. Okay, so I want to talk to you guys about day 223. And I'm going to be covering this basically while things continue to escalate. If they start resolving themselves, if they de-escalate, I'll be happy to not cover this. I feel like while things are getting quite serious, I need to get quite serious. That's just how I feel. I probably won't do it every day, but I do want to keep track of what's going on. I remember thinking when the Second World War happened, what were the Germans thinking and doing in the run-up to that? It didn't just happen. What were the Germans thinking and doing when it happened? Also, what was the rest of the world thinking and doing? And now we've got social media and we've got global news. Maybe we can use that to our benefit to sort of keep track of things that are happening before they happen. Okay, so I think I'm going to move this back here. Okay, so let's start off with this. So Putin could be preparing a nuclear test as a signal to the West, right? So there may be the use of nuclear weapons, but not the way that we are worried about. And if so, that's a good thing. In other words, he may be actually preparing a test to say, I've just done that, and that's kind of a warning, right? Liesel says, thank you so much. I'm so happy I'm made alive. I have so much work I usually have to catch up. Putin is dangerous. Perfect synergy with true crime and brilliant to get your followers thinking more broadly. Appreciate that. Thanks very much. So that is from this article from the Telegraph, also a publication I consider to be quite sober. Not a tabloid, not sensational. Some great coverage of the Madeleine McCann case, for example, as well, especially in the sort of early years of that. So can you see the nuclear weapons convoy sparks fears Putin could be preparing a test to send a signal? And I think that is right. I think that he's trying to send a warning. And when I wrote the script for this, it was trending on Twitter, right? I've got Twitter that is set to American Twitter trends. And so It was trending on Twitter, exactly that. So that's another thing that's a little bit different, right? And so can you guys see why we need to polygraph Putin, whether it's literally or in the true crime sense? Look at his body language, look at his statements. Is he bluffing? Can you see why that is really so important? It's really important that we read this man right, that we correctly figure out who this guy is before we find out who he is, right? Given what we are talking about. Okay, Timmy. So again, it's the idea of, damn, maybe if I do this or this, don't know why. There we go. See, I'm learning how this glitchiness works. Mary Rose says Putin and state TV threatening nukes since the beginning, so obviously it's a risk. So that's also a really interesting thing is what is going on state TV right now, right? What are they saying on their state TV? And so we're going to look at that as well. We're going to look at what is Russian mainstream media or Russian state TV. What are they saying? What's their narrative? That I agree with. Let's try and bring him back and see if okay. So what happened now? Okay. So he could be bluffing, and we're also seeing this sort of thing. I think some of you guys have seen that. This is from the Telegraph, and it's basically a train, right? And some people made quite an interesting comment. They said, "Why are you telling us this? It should be kept a secret. Don't alarm us. Don't alarm people. Don't share. So if I know this, do you think that the USA doesn't? Do you think the CIA doesn't? Do you think the militaries of various nations? If I know this and you know this, do you think that they don't?" It reminds me of when I wrote an article about a particular game reserve, and I took a really good photo of a black rhino. It had a really long horn, and the editor kind of freaked out, and she said, "You can't put photos of a black rhino in a publication. All the rhino poachers will come there." And I thought to myself, it sounds a bit hysterical. Surely the if that was the case, the game lodge would say to you, "Please don't take any photos of black rhinos." Surely they have their own security in place to deal with that threat, right? It's not like a case of if you take a photo, then that black rhino is going to get taken out. In other words, um, the distance from that to the other thing isn't like this small little gap. There's obviously something going on as well. The people who run that operation, right? Do you get what I'm saying? In the same way that if I put up a picture like that, is that going to lead to nuclear war? I do think it's a proper conversation to have. What about the public response to all this? Could there be panic? Could there be hysteria? Could there be concern? Well, at the moment, a lot of people don't even want to think about it. It's like, oh, it's overblown, whatever. I think the first step is to appreciate that things are getting quite serious. Right? And if you think about the virus, how most people never got serious about that. The other thing is, are you in a better position to know what to do in terms of your travel arrangements, in terms of plans for the future, if there's rumblings of war on the horizon? Do you get what I'm saying? If you're about to travel somewhere or you're about to make a big decision, have another baby, or I don't know, quit your job and move somewhere, this may give you some insight into whether that's a good decision, right? So, yeah, something else from the Telegraph. So a lot of people were saying that that troop movement, those nukes moving, wasn't legit. And it's an important question. One sparrow, one swallow doesn't make a summer. So the question is there anything else? Are there any other indications that something's going on? And so that's one of the things you want to look at. Are there any other sort of unusual stirrings that we need to pay attention to? And then that's why day 223 is, I think, quite important. So yes, just another tweet that I came across. It says, NATO had sent an intelligence report to its members and allies, alerting them to the fact that Russia is expected to test its nuclear-capable torpedo drone Poseidon, possibly in the Black Sea. And let me bring that up. Can you see that this is very recent? This was 7 hours earlier when I screen grabbed that. It's talking about NATO and their intelligence and what its members and allies have told them, that they are seeing this sort of thing, that Russia is expected to test its nuclear-capable torpedo drone Poseidon, right? So you can be kind of an idiot and say, I don't know what the train means. It probably doesn't mean anything. Well, here's something else already. And then we also want to look, is there something beyond this? But for me, the next step is, let's find out about this Poseidon. What is it? What is this submarine all about? And one thing that I learned that I didn't know is it's actually an unmanned submarine. It's kind of like a huge drone. And what it does is it creates radioactive tsunamis. In other words, it creates massive explosions at sea, which makes great big waves that are in a way more destructive than the weapon itself. In other words, the point of this weapon is to create huge tsunamis. The tsunami actually destroys the coastal target. So the weapon is actually an indirect weapon. That's something I didn't know. Terry, good to see you here. Terry's in Australia. I hope you're going to sleep soon. Victoria says, I like to watch your channel. I'm from Eastern Ukraine. Wow. Okay, so we would really be interested to hear your thoughts about this. For example, do you think it's cause for concern? Are you looking on from America? I'm sure you are looking on from America to the events going on there. And also, are there things that we need to pay attention to that you're aware of that are going on in Ukraine? I'm sure you're paying attention to the news even more than what we are. Deborah says, I want to know as much as possible. Kelly says, I didn't know that either about Poseidon. So we're going to talk now a little bit about this particular weapon and find out about it, right? It's really just being curious. Let's have the scout mindset and see what we find out. Maybe there's something, maybe there's nothing. Okay. So can you see that just this general idea, which you have in multiple platforms now, it's this idea that Russia is about to use nuclear weapons, whether it's a test, whether it's a signal, whether it's a warning, or whether it's for real. It's kind of current. It's like part of where we are right now. And then the question is, what more than that? So I happened to catch this on Fox News briefly, just him making a little speech, and it says, Putin ally calls for low-yield nuclear weapons. And as far as I remember, this ally was a Chechen leader who said, "You know what? Let's use a let's kind of use a low-yield weapon." And how I understood that was Russia had just experienced a setback. Russia had experienced a defeat. That's also part of the context we need to look at. Why would you take a extreme step? Why would you take a different step now? Well, if you'd kind of mustered all these forces for months, it's like 7 months now, and then Ukraine got the better of you towards the end. Well, now you want to you want the knockout blow. You want to reset the status quo. Well, a quick and easy but ill-advised way of doing that would be something like low-yield nuclear weapons. But that was a recommendation, as far as I know, by a Chechen leader, a Chechen military guy. So I've now showed you the Financial Times, the Telegraph, and Fox News, all talking about the same thing now, right? And now we're going to move on to deal with this Financial Times article directly. And I can't help thinking about these words, and we're going to deal with the kind of person that Putin is. We're going to deal with, his personality and his mindset in a moment. But I can't help thinking just how portentous those words are. One wrong note eventually ruins the entire symphony. When you're dealing with nuclear weapons, one wrong person that's in charge of a powerful country can ruin our civilization, can ruin life on Earth. One wrong person with access to these kind of weapons that comes along can ruin it for everybody. And aren't the odds that that's eventually going to happen? A leader is eventually going to come forward that is cuckoo in the fullness of time. If it doesn't take 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, eventually a leader comes along that surprises everyone. Well, the question is that this leader? Deborah says Poseidon is an unmanned underwater vehicle which is capable of traveling vast distances. So if you think about Poseidon, why is it unmanned? Well, it's because it's in an area where nuclear weapons are detonated. So when you detonate nuclear weapons, you don't really want to be there yourself. That's why a lot of nuclear weapons are dropped out of aeroplanes. You drop it and you fly away. You don't want to, you don't want to detonate a weapon like that and be anywhere in that area. That's why this is unmanned, right? It kind of gives you a real sense of how deadly, we're talking about. Simdal says no nuke can be intercepted. Terry says there's no defense against a tsunami. Victoria says it's absolutely possible he will use it to give a major warning that he's not kidding. Yeah, I mean, how this conversation started was in the media, they were saying, is he bluffing? And someone was saying he does not bluff. And I think it's a combination that he does bluff, he does manipulate you. I think the whole Nord Stream thing was a kind of a bluff where he does something, but you think it's somebody else. In other words, it's not bluffing, but there's also an element of misleading that's taking place there, which you'd expect from a former KGB person. That's also true. Okay. Right. So the current coverage on the Financial Times is anything if not terrifying. Look at that. Let me bring that up. When conspiracy theorists run countries, we're going to deal with this particular article in more depth a little bit later on. But what he's basically saying, and this guy actually did a great analysis, Gideon Rachman, he did a great analysis on Putin and whether he was bluffing. And, that's also something that really got onto my radar, the whole thing with the Nord Stream thing. So he's basically calling Putin a conspiracy theorist. And so if that's true, what conspiracy theory does he believe in, and what could be the consequences of that? Look at that. The paranoid fantasies of Vladimir Putin and others increase the dangers for the world, right? So think about that word paranoid. If someone's paranoid and they've got nuclear weapons, what could the result of that be? In other words, you're thinking someone's attacking you. You're thinking there are all these moves against you. So what are you going to do? Deborah says Poseidon is about 20 meters long, can dive to 1,000 meters, has a range of 10,000 kilometers. I'm going to deal with Poseidon. Don't worry, I'm going to touch on that. So this is the part I want to highlight from his article. He wrote, the most dangerous conspiracy theorist of them all is Vladimir Putin, who's currently threatening the world with nuclear war, right? To me, a statement like that stands out when I read it in the Financial Times. To me, that's not something I read and then carry on with my life business as usual. That jolts me awake and says, whoa, 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 what is happening right now, right? That's why I also feel that I want to share that sense of gravitas with you guys, and let's be forewarned. Let's arm ourselves with information and not be taken surprise, right? It's a little bit like a hurricane. You want to track this hurricane. At this point, it's just been identified. Well, is it going to get worse, and which way is it going? Right, it's the same kind of thing. What's happening here? Are we dealing with a major hurricane? Is it going to impact me? Is it going to impact other people? What is going on? That's really what we're looking at. But it's an incredible statement. The most dangerous conspiracy theorist of them all is Vladimir Putin, and he's currently threatening the world with nuclear war. Do you think that that is a not true statement? Do you think that that's a not true statement, that right now the president of a superpower right now is threatening the world, not once, but continuously with nuclear war? Moxie says, if anyone is interested in KGB tactics, watch Yuri Bezmenov videos. Okay. Simdal says, is the idea that NATO and America want to destroy Russia paranoia? I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if they're trying to destroy Russia. They're trying to, anyway, I'm not even going to have that conversation because I think I know what you decided already. I think if you want to have that conversation, then you're basically saying Putin's totally justified in what he's doing. You should do what you're doing. I don't know if that's what your argument. I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. I also agree with that. Okay. So think about that again. One wrong note eventually ruins the entire symphony. That applies to the thought process of any biased human being. If you ask the question, think about this just in terms of us. What if someone who's prone to conspiracy theories, and I think in true crime there are a lot of people who are, what could happen in the world if someone who's prone to conspiracy theories gets access to nuclear weapons, just in a general way? Like if you imagine a YouTuber that talks about, could it be this? And I think there's I think something is really going on in this particular case. You see it right now in the Kylie Rodney case. There's some pretty extreme, I'm not even going to repeat them here, but conspiracies that have come out around that. And you say, what if you took that person and gave them access to nuclear weapons? But they're already paranoid. They're already seeing devils and dragons, and everyone is guilty. Well, what do you think they would do? So the question is basically, would they use nuclear weapons or wouldn't they? Someone who is paranoid, someone who is kind of got a persecution complex, someone who is blaming and feeling victimized the whole time. Let me repeat that. What if someone prone to conspiracy theories became a world leader? What would happen? Well, we're about to find out. And that's again where you say, what's the harm in speculating? What's the harm in we're just asking questions? It's totally harmless, right? What's the harm in thinking about that? Well, it's a conspiracy theory, and you are learning how to not deal with reality. There is a great harm in that, but carry on. We're about to find out where that eventually takes you. What is wrong with not being in touch with reality? What's wrong with looking at that possibility? What about we're just talking? We're just sharing. What's wrong with that? We're about to find out what's wrong with that. We're about to find out. So this is another article. Obviously, you've seen it. It's behind me. Which nuclear weapons could Putin use? And then it says Russia has a stockpile of so-called tactical nuclear arms. Sorry, it's not there. Russia has a stockpile of so-called tactical nuclear arms intended for battlefield use. Now, I've got to say, I really learned something here. My knowledge base definitely expanded. And so let me try and share that with you guys. So I'm going to show you. Okay, so before I get to that, if you thought coronavirus was the new abnormal, it feels like things are about to go up several notches, doesn't it? You could wake up tomorrow morning and a country might not exist, or a city of 1 million people, here today, gone tomorrow. This isn't science fiction either. It's not some kind of disaster movie. We are now in the fabric of this situation. We're there right now, and most of us are still finding it difficult to pay any attention to it. Because our problem is, as a society, we aren't sure what's real. So when you talk to people about this, they say, no, I don't think it's real. I wouldn't worry about it. And then you say, well, but do you know what's real in general? Do we know what's real in general? And so that's, again, just what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, what's really going on here, right? Let's think about it. Let's be curious, and let's try and find out what we're dealing with. Okay, so now I'm going to just go on to the next thing. Now we're going to deal with the Belgorod. And that's the image that I've got as part of the title slide. That is the Belgorod over there. And if you look closely, as far as I know, that is a nuclear warhead that's being transported. They're quite big, right? And so the Belgorod is capable of carrying quite a substantial payload. We'll get to that in a second. So let me bring up the Belgorod first. Just on Wikipedia. I'll put a link to that in chat so you guys can check it out. So we've seen that, Susan, good to see you. We've seen that there's a train that has now been mentioned, and now we've seen a submarine that's been mentioned in fairly high level. Wait, I'm just trying to see where I put that. So they're trying to test a nuclear capable torpedo drone Poseidon in the Black Sea, right? And that's why we're now dealing with this Russian submarine Belgorod, right? And this really surprised me. It's unmanned. Look at that. Unmanned underwater vehicle. It's got 6 Poseidon drones, right? Armament, 6 Poseidon drones. What did we see over here? Where is it? It's not that. Not that. It's there. Let me put them side by side. Can you see? Torpedo drone Poseidon. Well, where do you get the torpedo drone Poseidon? You get them on the Belgorod, which looks like that. And it's unmanned. Well, let's have a look at these Poseidon drones. There's one of them. It's just giving you size. So this is really what we're talking about. Anyway, we'll deal with the Russian submarine, I think, first. There's a size comparison. Okay. Lawley says, my dad has so much knowledge about this topic. I wish he was still alive to have a conversation with him. Sorry to hear that. Sorry to hear that. Moxie says, my dad was an actual spy, so believe me, we are not told the truth. Mary Rose says, Russia's nuclear doctrine is it's okay to use if it's an existential threat. Yeah, that's so. It's good to see some folks here who are quite clued up. It's good to see that. Yeah, MAD is acronym for mutually assured destruction. If ever there was an accurate. Thanks, Karina. I appreciate that. Blue Hill says the whole situation is very concerning. Glad to see you talking about this. So let's see where we are in that poll. 91% saying things are getting serious. Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to show you guys some graphics that really shocked me, I must say. So before we get to those graphics, I'm going to take you guys through a quick run through of headlines where, remember I said to you, you say, okay, so there's talk about a convoy, a train convoy. Then they're talking about these Poseidon missiles, right? Poseidon. And then you say, well, is that it? You know, is what is sort of going on? Well, then if you look at all of these headlines in context, they're all taking place now in the last 24 hours. If you just run through these headlines, it gives you an idea where we're going. And these are not really tabloid headlines, right? So we're going to quickly do that. So if you're a little wishy-washy about the mainstream media, if you say, I'm not sure if I really believe in the mainstream media, well, and nuclear war, no, it's all overblown. Well, then you probably don't want to look at what I'm about to show you. So all of these headlines are from the last 24 hours. So starting with this one. So take myself away. Russian convoy linked to secretive nuclear division heads to Ukraine amid fears of, why are you here? Amid fears of Vladimir Putin testing a destructive weapon. So again, there's another reference to that he may test something. Here's another headline that caught my eye. NATO warns Russia may have deployed its weapon of the apocalypse, Poseidon. Here's all you need to know. There it is. This is for some context, also from the Financial Times. Ukrainians continue to push back Russian troops in the east and south. So the background to all of this is that Russia is kind of being, in a way, humiliated. Russia, in a way, is being pushed back. So what are you going to do? It's almost like a heavyweight fighter who's losing a boxing match, and he's got a knockout punch. Well, is he going to use it or not? Shouldn't he use it? This is from yesterday, right? So what's currently taking place in the war is that Russian troops are being pushed back, and that is why they say Putin is in a corner, is desperate, and that is the context for him possibly using these weapons. And I think any person would say, I can actually see that psychology playing out. That psychology does make sense to me. You've got these weapons, why wouldn't you use them? I don't mean that as that's normal. I'm saying that is possibly how he's thinking. I'm not saying, oh, if you've got those weapons, you should use them. I'm saying in this situation, in this context, that seems to be what's taking place. I'm certainly not rationalizing it. So here's another one. Russia's elites are starting to admit the possibility of defeat. And this is from, seems like a Russian correspondent, Tatiana Stanovaya. And so that's the other thing. It is looking like the whole war in Ukraine has not been a success. What is Putin going to do? All of this is about making Russia better, greater. Well, isn't he failing now in that mission? So Tatiana writes here, the longer the conflict rages and the more resources the Russian regime throws into the furnace of war, the more isolated Putin may become in his bid for nuclear escalation. You keep seeing these same comments coming up over and over again. This is a really good article, very good article. I'm going to put a link to it in the description, in the chat. Moxie says it's dangerous to humiliate a person like Putin. So have a look at these graphics. They're from the Financial Times. I really didn't know this. I don't know about you guys. I really didn't know this. Russia's tactical forces far outnumber those of the US. This is tactical nuclear weapons. That's different to strategic nuclear weapons, right? So have a look at that. US total 230. Russia 1,830. Let me take myself out of that picture. Let me repeat that. US total 230. B-61 bombs carried by Europe-based US and other NATO aircraft. That's all that they've got in terms of tactical nuclear weapons. Russia, look at that. 1,830. They can use it. They can use air power, naval, short-range ballistic, and surface-to-air. It's quite a big difference, isn't it? So let me take you through some more headlines, also from the last 24 hours. New York Post, Putin deploys world's largest submarine with apocalypse drone capabilities. Right? So can you see that you're getting the same narrative from publications all over the world? They're all saying the same thing. they're talking about this submarine that's being deployed. This is from the Daily Mail. Putin deploys Belgorod nuclear submarine, which carries Poseidon underwater drone capable of unleashing radioactive tsunamis, which lay waste to enemy coastlines. Putin threatened the West with nukes over the war in Ukraine. It's the same theme repeated over and over again. And I must say, I learned something. Like, I didn't know that there was a weapon like that where the idea was you create massive tsunamis, radioactive tsunamis. I really didn't know that that was a thing, and now we do. So here you see non-strategic, the tactical nuclear weapons. The source for this is from Financial Times, as a share of stockpiles. Look at that. There you see it. Russia's got 1,830 of these tactical nuclear weapons. Now, as I understand it, you use tactical nuclear weapons within the theater. So if you've got a battle going on and you just can't get rid of an enemy, then that's the idea for the tactical weapon. In other words, it's a somewhat smaller and more mobile nuclear weapon, right? As opposed to strategic, which is something that you would deploy in a country far, far away, right? The idea with the tactical is that it's somewhat short range, if I can put it that way. Blue Hill says we can't let it happen, but yes, we can do. Yet we can do little to stop any of it. It does make you feel helpless, but I think you can at least be informed, and that is why I said, if you in the UK, if you're in Europe, if you're in America, there's some things that won't be disclosed, but you might see convoys moving, and then that'll give you an indication of certain things that are taking place, and you might then want to take certain action yourself. That's all. Okay. And then there's also this is also really scary. This tells you the weapon yields. You know, you kind of think, oh, a tactical weapon. I guess it's not really a big deal. It's a small little nuclear weapon. They can be quite small. You can see they're 0.3 kilotons. So it can be a lot smaller than Hiroshima. That's Hiroshima over there. It can be small. It can be 0.3 kilotons, or much smaller than Hiroshima. Let's say at least 18 times smaller, but it can also be 10 times bigger, 170 kilotons. The source of that's also the Financial Times. So the point really of all of that is just to show that tactical nukes are not a small matter. If someone says, oh, it's just tactical weapons, sometimes the yield could be less, but the yield could be 10 times more than Hiroshima. This is a quote from that article. It's entirely possible the strike would not hit the theater of battle, but somewhere a certain distance away. So that's the other question, is what are we likely to see here? Are we likely to see something hitting a target in Ukraine, or is it going to hit some almost random target, as if to say that's your warning? That's another question. Why would Putin make his own territory that he wants radioactive? So you kind of get the sense he's going to possibly choose a tertiary target, right? Moxie says, you think with today's technology there would be a way to remove one world leader? The problem with that is, if you do that once, you could do that with anybody. I think there's sort of an agreement that amongst world leaders that you don't take that step. Okay. The thing to try to sort of remember is not to become, if you're getting very anxious, if you're getting depressed, then step away from all of this. The idea is that you are informed without being dysfunctional, right? So pay attention to this as a way of being informed, but certainly don't dwell on it to the extent that you become kind of paralyzed or do you know what I'm saying? Um, so I'm not going to be covering this wall to wall every single day. I'm just going to be covering it when I feel that there are escalations worth knowing about. It can make you feel helpless, and that's not the idea. It's also not the idea to make you feel to alarm someone unnecessarily. The idea is simply to be informed about what's going on in our world, right? Okay. Have I dealt with the Belgorod sufficiently? I'm not quite sure if I have. Yeah. Okay. So I think we know enough about the Belgorod. We don't need to be sort of scientists about the thing. Now I'm going to just take you guys into what Russian state TV have been saying. So this is literally on Russian state TV. Nuclear blast and Armageddon talk swamps Russian TV after calls for nukes on Kyiv. And you can see there's a Russian writing. This is from the US Sun. Vladimir Putin's propaganda TV channel has shown a terrifying segment in anticipation of a nuclear conflict. So it feels like the Russians are being prepared for this. And so a question arises, should we be prepared in some way, even if it's just psychologically? Should we be prepared? Should we think about it? Okay. I'm just going to close my window. So just give me a second. I'll just leave that on there. Uh, just give me a second. Okay. Okay. Then there's also this article that I want to touch on again. Remember this whole thing when conspiracy theorists run countries. I'll put a link to that in chat. Really good article by Gideon Rachman. And it really makes you think about the idea of conspiracy theories, this idea that conspiracy theories are harmless, right? And I've kind of challenged people in true crime on their conspiracy theories, and you kind of get this idea of kind of we're having fun. It's entertaining. We're not doing any harm. We're just thinking about this idea and we're thinking about that idea. It doesn't do any harm, does it? Well, now we're going to look at how it does do a heck of a lot of harm. Not being able to tell the difference between reality and not reality does a heck of a lot of harm. And opportunistic YouTubers, and a lot of YouTubers are opportunists. they prey on that psychology where you think it could be something, and then they let you feel that it is that thing. So in other words, to some extent, we all predisposed to conspiracies. The other day, I saw lights in the sky, and I was tempted to think, well, I've never seen a UFO, but that I can't explain. I really don't know what that was. But I was thinking, you know what, that is exactly the problem. I don't know what that is. That doesn't mean it's a UFO. And it turned out to be Starlink satellites. Just because you don't know what something is doesn't mean it's the worst thing or the most extreme thing that it could possibly be. And our thinking is often very uneducated, uninformed. And when it's that way, you don't see a gray area. It's either this or it's that. Well, it can also be something more subtle. But we'd like to be binary on social media. We like to be, we like things to be simple. So we're going to talk now about the danger of conspiracy theory, but in the reality of this particular ban. So this is quoting from the Financial Times. On previous occasions, Putin and his key advisors have made reference to the conspiracy theory of the golden billion. This holds that the West has decided that the world only has enough resources to support 1 billion people, and therefore it intends to break up Russia and steal its resources. Last week, he claimed Western countries have abandoned religion and embraced Satanism. Have you guys ever heard of the golden billion theory? Ever heard of the golden billion theory? Now, I think it kind of makes sense. In the Avengers movie, Avengers Endgame, and those last Avengers movies, it was about this Titan called Thanos who decides that there aren't enough resources in the universe. We need to cut all life in half just so that the remaining half can have a decent life. And that's sort of equitable. That was in a recent movie. The other thing that is interesting with the golden billion conspiracy is you have similar conspiracies in other communities. For example, immigrants are going to take away. There's not enough in the world, and so immigrants are going to take it away, or this or that particular race group is threatening us. There's also I remember when I was studying economics, there was this idea of the last man standing psychology, which is that there aren't enough resources in the world, and so someone needs to be a cowboy and get rid of everyone else to be the last man standing. A country that needs to be the last man standing. But it is this idea which isn't what's the word? It's not all that far-fetched, is that the world cannot support 8 billion people. And so someone's got to go. It's not a far-fetched idea. Of course, a civilized world would deal with that problem by, on the one hand, ramping up food production and dealing with energy issues, and on the other hand, dealing with population growth. I've often said the biggest problem isn't climate change, it's actually population growth. But who wants to be told you can only have 1 child or 2 instead of 3 or 4? I don't actually have any children, so I'm not part of the the problem. But unfortunately, one of the ways that historically human beings deal with overpopulation, I think, is war. It's kind of the human beings' solution to what happens in an ecosystem. You have lions and antelopes, and they sort of sort each other out. Sometimes they're more lions, sometimes they're more antelope. But with human beings, we sort of we've grown into this really huge population overrunning the whole planet. So you could argue that a natural, although I really don't think nuclear weapons is natural, but you could argue that it's a war is a normal way that human beings balance out power, except when it comes to nuclear weapons, because they are so powerful, right? I'm just saying there is some merit to this conspiracy theory, but the way you handle it is you try and do it in a civilized way. You try and scientifically increase your use of, you find ways to harness energy. Fusion is one way, and food production and so on. And you don't simply see another human being as a threat to you, and you at the expense of me, thus I'll be at the expense of you, right? But anyway, this is where the conspiracy comes along, and they basically say this is America's position, is that America wants to get rid of Russia, so we must get rid of America. That's how the psychology works. That is exactly what it is. So if you've had the psychology to begin with, then you go into Russia, then you go into Ukraine, and then you get a response. And if you think about it, there hasn't really been much of a response from NATO or America. You haven't had American troops, as far as we know, entering Ukraine, or NATO. The whole no-fly zone over Ukraine has been the whole fact that the airspace above Ukraine has been not been violated by NATO or by the USA, shows that America and NATO don't want to escalate. We don't want to get involved in that way. And that standoffishness has sort of allowed Russia in a way to step forward. But now it's reached a point where are they going to be allowed to step forward further, and they are actually being pushed back. And how are they going to deal with that? Well, we already passed the hour mark. I don't really want to go much more than an hour. So that's the first quote I wanted to highlight. Here's the next one. It's from this article. When conspiracy theorists run countries. He also says, conspiracy theories have existed for centuries, since the age of witch burning and before. Have you guys noticed how often I've been talking about witch hunts and witch burning on my channel? Have you guys noticed how that language has become quite frequent on my channel? I've spoken about witch hunts in the Kylie Rodney case. I've spoken about witch hunting in Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. I've actually gone into the history of it to say this is how crazy our thinking is becoming. And it's because it is so in tune with conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories is about witch hunts and blaming someone else. But that kind of thinking belongs in the dark ages. But that kind of thinking is back, unfortunately. And YouTubers have played a very big role in making people kind of natural witch hunters. Oh, it's normal to think this way. It's normal to accuse someone of something with virtually no evidence. Because I think that they're guilty, they're guilty. That's a witch hunt. That's a witch hunt by definition. It's not a nice place to be living in. If there is a war and things start escalating in a really bad way, it's not a nice place to be living where your neighbor and just people around you are basically witch hunters. I mean, you want to have solidarity with at least your own citizens, but you can have your own citizens thinking that you are not trustworthy in your own country. So he goes on to say, in our era of globalization, they are particularly favored by extreme nationalists who see shadowy foreign forces lurking behind every setback or national humiliation. This is quoting from this article. He also says, a retreat into such theories involves a flight from reality, which then invites further disasters. Now, if you know me and you know my channel, I talk over and over and over again about reality. What is the reality of the situation? How good are we at interrogating reality? Can we see reality? And it feels like, certainly in the Kylie Rodney case, if reality hit you in the face like a frying pan, you still wouldn't be able to tell whether it was real or not. Feels like that. It feels like people refuse to see reality and refuse to think about reality. Lisa says, Lisa, is that the Lisa from California? Really powerful, important discussion. I believe we are devolving. Lisa, are you my Lisa or are you a different Lisa? I'd just like to know. Laura says, I'm a true American mutt. My family immigrated here at the turn of the century from Poland, Greece, Germany, and Ireland. Okay. Oh, okay. So good to have you here, Lisa. My former co-author on certain books is with us in chat. Really good to have you here. And good to hear that I'm talking about something that's worth listening to. Hybrid Pisces says, thanks for covering this. It's so important. Okay, so did I highlight that particular comment? So this is again a quote from this article. A retreat into such theories involves a flight from reality. I've been saying it for so long that all of these crimes occur because someone is caught up in a fairy tale, because they're not dealing with reality. And when things come to a head, their way of dealing with that reality is by committing a crime. It's cheating reality. And you kind of get the same feeling with Putin. Is he, in his mind, had this fairy tale of, I want to expand Russia. It'll be so nice if we have that part of Ukraine. Yeah, but if you start a war, will you be able to stop it? Yeah, but do you know how the West is going to respond to this? And I do really believe that Putin thought he would go in and the West would do nothing. That because he took Crimea, the West would allow him to take parts of Ukraine or even the whole of Ukraine. That the West is so distracted and caught up in its own reality that he would be allowed to do what he was doing. And also that they wouldn't stomach because the West is so greedy, they wouldn't stomach the cost of intervention. Europe wouldn't, and the West wouldn't. And I think that surprised him, that the West actually does have some backbone. The other thing that I think Putin considered was that the virus had really weakened the world. The virus weakened world economies. So if there was a time to hit the world economy, or a time where the world economy couldn't take a hit in terms of inflation and in terms of supply lines and stuff, it was when he invaded Ukraine. Like, the world can't afford to oppose me. And in a weird way, it was quite surprising that the world basically said, well, we will find a way to afford this. We will stand up to this. I do think the pandemic was a big reason why Putin felt the time is right now. The world is weakened, and now's a good time for me to strengthen my position, for Russia to strengthen its position. Doesn't that make sense strategically to take that position? Susan B, thanks very much. What did Lisa say? We are devolving, that's for sure. Okay. So, quoting again from this article, as things go wrong, the natural reaction for a conspiracy theorist is to double down, claiming that the disaster that their policies have produced is further evidence of the original conspiracy. so well written, I must say. Very good work by this writer from Financial Times, Gideon Rachman. As things go wrong, the natural reaction for conspiracy theorists is to double down. So if you think about the Kylie Rodney case and the sort of conspiracy surrounding that, I believe the tow truck guy in that case is a conspiracy. Well, then you double down. You say, if anyone criticizes us, the world will come down on you. That is exactly that. You dig in your heels and you insist that you're right. In other words, you have the soldier mindset, not the scout mindset. You're no longer curious. You are just trying to defend what you said. Lisa says, the only hope for us to survive is by not turning away, educating ourselves, staying in reality. Thanks a lot, Lisa. So that's really what this is about. It's not about trying to frighten ourselves, not about any agenda or any political thing. It's simply, let's be informed, let's be curious, let's know what's going on. Let's not have reality happen to us. Let's try and catch up to reality because we've been distracted. We haven't been paying attention. Joe Huck says, the Putin submarine makes me think of Red October. Yeah. And right now, if you think about the hunt for Red October, it was about this guy defecting. That was really what it was all about, if I remember correctly. And right now, I think I've seen a number, 335,000 Russians have already basically left their country. You could say defected. They basically just run out of their country. Already a third of a million. You've already had that effect of Ukrainians in their millions heading into Europe. Now you've got Russians going into Europe. Someone said the smartest people know that they are not always right. Yeah, that's a good point. The smartest people know I could be wrong about this. Okay. And then the final thing I'm going to say, and it's the conclusion of this article, it's right at the end. And I again want to put a link in the chat if you guys didn't get it. He says, some years ago, Angela Merkel, the former German chancellor, the former leader of Germany, suggested that Putin had lost touch with reality and was living in another world. So if you ask in a very simple, general way, what's the harm in thinking about conspiracies? What's the harm in sort of going along with that? Well, the harm is that, number one, you lose touch with reality. The other harm is that you live in another world. And out of that, you can become a danger to other people. Your living in another world can make you a danger to somebody else's reality. Think about people living in different realities. You become a threat to their reality. Think about Jeffrey Dahmer and his reality, right? Anyway, we'll talk about that separately when we deal with that. I don't know whether Lisa, have you been following that series? So literally in the case of Vladimir Putin, he is threatened by a particular reality, and is it real? In other words, what we have, just trying to find that image. Where is it? What we have here is possibly someone doing something to the world, not even based on reality, but based on paranoia, based on someone who's, whether you want to say it's mentally ill or in a fantasy world, right? I don't know if there's anything worse than that. Like, for something as possibly devastating as we're talking about to take place because of something that's not even real. That's very, very scary. And if we come out of this, if we come through this, right? If we can kind of get through this period unscathed, hopefully there's a happy ending, but let's just follow what happens. If we can get through this, we really need to address people who are living in a dream world, people who are not attached to reality. We need to start dealing with those people. I know those people in my own life. You need to deal with the people in your life who aren't in touch with reality. Do you guys agree? That's the lesson out of this, is we become so distracted, so detached from reality, that it's starting, unreality is starting to threaten us. We need to get real. If you think about how Hollywood went dark, right? Like with the Batman movies, Hollywood was trying to emphasize gritty reality, but you can go from there to too dark, to too gritty, to too paranoid. It almost went the whole cycle from camp, light-hearted, fun, silly, to very real, gritty reality, like with Christopher Nolan, and then even darker, arguably too dark. It is crazy to me that we live in the 21st century and we've got access to so much information, yet it feels like most people are misinformed. Most people convenience store their reality. You have the opportunity to find out what reality is, but instead you want reality to suit you. Think about when the virus came out. Do you want to believe in it? Well, then I don't have to believe in it, so I won't. How well did we do regarding that? By the way, Stephanie's got corona right now. She's sick at home. And Stephanie's a pharmacist. I think her father is as well. It's still out there. Anyway, that's something else. Beverly says the writing is on the wall. Okay, so it's 7:30 here in South Africa. The sun is up. It's another day. Where I am, it's day 224. We'll see what happens today. It does look like we are going to possibly see a nuclear test. In other words, on Russian territory, Russians saying, we can do this. Be warned. And what's the reaction going to then be? What's also quite interesting is Elon Musk has offered a ceasefire plan or proposal, and I think the president of Ukraine himself basically said F off. Let me see if I can find that. Have you guys heard about that? Elon Musk actually offered or suggested a kind of a solution. Here it is. So I'm just going to take you guys through these last few headlines. So that's from the US Sun. Elon Musk and Vladimir Zelensky Twitter feud erupts as Ukrainian president slams Tesla CEO's Russian peace proposal. And I think the peace proposal is basically that Ukraine should cede the territories that Russia has, something like that. So he says here, he suggested making Crimea a region that Russia invaded, formerly part of Russia. And he said water supply to Crimea should be assured, Ukraine should stay neutral. And then, so it was actually the country's ambassador to Germany said F off. But then Zelensky responded with a poll of his own, where he asked users to decide which Elon Musk do you like more, one who supports Ukraine or one who supports Russia. Quite interesting. And then there was also this. We know about that. And then this is the final thing I want to show you guys. again, it's just contextually interesting. Ukraine pushes further into territory annexed by Moscow, and I thought there was something here about Elon Musk. Anyway, if it was there, it's maybe been updated. Okay. It is interesting that the world's richest man is concerned enough. Think about that. The world's richest man is concerned enough to be making suggestions now to end the escalation. Is trying to offer a way to de-escalate. It is quite interesting. Lorley says, "Stay well, everyone." Okay. Okay, Stephanie, I don't know if you're watching or listening. You might be watching or listening later on. A lot of people offering their support. Jody C says people want to ignore reality. I can kind of understand that sometimes reality is a drudge, but not when it's so important as this. And I also think it's good to practice dealing with reality. Like true crime to me is a way to test your ability in a separate discipline. How good are you at seeing reality? And I've got to say my experience has been that a lot of people, even people, so-called experts, aren't good at lie spotting. Um, we tend to label criminals. Our application of reality, I feel, is very poor. And if you've been hearing me lately sighing before I say the word true crime when I introduce an episode, it's because that's really how I feel. Is that true crime has become like trash culture. It's become unreal. The whole landscape's become unreal. And that to me is extremely worrying. Where our world is going is extremely worrying. Okay, I think that is it for me. I'm not going to go past the 90-minute mark. It's already half an hour longer than I thought it would be. But I thought I would just share where we are contextually on day 223, and we'll see what happens in the next few days. I want you guys to try and pay attention to the news, but obviously don't sort of watch the entire news cycle, carry on with your life, but ask yourself, what is reality? What is going on in the situation? It is important. Also encourage those around you to pay attention to the news and to pay attention to what's happening and to think about it. Thanks a lot, Terry. Thanks, Karina. Celeste says, I completely agree on true crime. It's like a new form of insanity. Yeah, I mean, true crime is where you really want to, it's the one place where you feel like it should be immune from conspiracies. It should be immune from someone manipulating the narrative. It should be where you are truly investigative and truly focused on the truth. And the fact is, true crime these days isn't true anymore. It's fake crime. Cynthia Nielsen says allowing Putin to keep parts of Ukraine is just reinforcing his behavior. The problem is that you're dealing with a paranoid person, and so if you start hitting him back, which has been happening, he's been forced to cede territory. What is he going to do? So something I considered, and it's probably not, I'm not a military tactician, but something I considered is if you're going to, if there's a counter move against Russia, you should maybe go to Vladivostok. If you know the map of Russia, let me bring it up. But yeah, I mean, with the age of kind of ballistic missiles, it probably is not, doesn't really apply. geography and distance isn't really going to apply. Can you guys see that map? Let me take myself away here. I was thinking if you want to sort of take on Russia directly, you go all the way to Vladivostok, which is I can't quite see it here. I don't quite see it. I know it's in the far east, but for some reason I don't see it on this map. Oh, there it is. There it is, Vladivostok. In other words, you open up a front in the far east, and thus you stretch Russia in the far west in terms of Ukraine and the far east in terms of Vladivostok, right? I'm just saying, tactically, one way to deal with this is you stretch Russia at both ends of its territory. Whether that's going to happen, I don't know. Of course, right next to Vladivostok is North Korea, Japan, and so on. One's also got to think about that, and China. So, I'm not a military tactician, and so what I've just said there may be the dumbest military strategy you've ever heard. I'm just saying I've thought of it. Instead of keeping the conflict in Ukraine, what if you took it somewhere else? Just a thought. You could also argue that doing that escalates the war, and I would agree that that is the case. Okay, Lisa, if you're still here, you should go to sleep. Terry and Lisa, I think you're both in California. Is it past midnight? What time is it in California? I think it's maybe 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. Yeah, so it's 20 to 11 in California. So not too late. So I hope you guys are going to sleep peacefully after this live in California. Just think that forewarned is forearmed, and let's keep tracking the story. Let's keep seeing where things are developing. Is there any harm in that? No, hope not. Helena, are you also in California? Quite a few folks from California here. Moxie as well. Okay. Two fronts is difficult. Yeah, I think that's true. So the last thing I'm going to do is just do a Google search and just see what is in the news right now in real time. I'm just going to Google Russia. And this is what it says. Ukraine promises to export more grains to African countries. Okay. See, 355,000 Russians have already mobilized. Have fled Russia. And then look at that. Russia's upper chamber ratifies agreements on the admission of 4 regions. What that does is it basically, in a way, escalates the situation. So Russia is saying those regions in Ukraine belong to us now, and we have the right to defend them. Here's another article from a South African publication. Zelensky aides sees war ending in months. EU edges closer to Russia sanctions deal. And let's have a look at the last stories here. Russia withdrew. Okay, so that's 3 days ago. Europe must cut down on natural gas as reckless Russia could shut off all pipeline flows, IEA. That's another escalation. That's something else that is escalating in terms of this is kind of like an energy war, right? So I'm not going to take it further than that. I want to thank you guys for being with me in this, I think, important discussion. I see 92% say this is worth talking about because things are getting serious. Totally agree with that. And so I really appreciate that most of you feel the same way. Just a reminder in terms of what's coming up on this channel, just a reminder in the next few days, we'll be talking about Dharma. You must let me know, Lisa, if you'd like to be part of that. And then also the Gabby Petito story, I'll be dealing with that in the next day or so as well. So that's what you can look forward to besides the commentary on this. As I said, I'm only going to be covering things that are related to the escalation, and if it de-escalates, then and I think things aren't that serious, I'll obviously not be covering it. But for as long as it's of serious concern, then I will be covering it. Okay, so that is it from me. Lisa, I hope your dog is doing okay. My dog says hi. Okay. Folks in California, I hope you have a good sleep and a good Thursday. I'm going to get going with my Thursday. I think I'm going to be going to gym today after quite a long period of not going. So take care. And what does Lisa say? After Dharma, we can talk Bello. Sounds good. Just let me know when it suits you. Rose already says thanks for the live discussion. Thanks everybody. Cool. Oh, Winnie says hi to Timmy. Cool. Okay. Okay. It's Thursday where I am. And there's also the TCRS book club. That'll probably be later today. That should be quite exciting. I actually want to have Lisa on when we do a book club. She was my co-author, and she can tell you how hard it is to write a book, and also how hard it is sometimes the endless editing and the endless rigmarole involved in that. It's quite a business. Someone asked me on Twitter, what advice would you give to people? What unsolicited advice would you give to people? Don't write books was my answer. Oh, hang on. Is today Wednesday? Sorry. Yeah, so tomorrow I'll be doing book club. That's Thursday. Thursday will be book club. Sorry, I'm a little bit, as I say, I've not just gotten up, but I'm a bit fuzzy. Book club, the first TCRS book club will be Thursday, probably around about this time as well. Okay. Cool. So now you guys know. Thanks, Nick. We'll watch the parts I missed. Oh, we've got someone here from Vladivostok. I was born in Vladivostok, but now in North Carolina. Okay. Hope you are doing well over there. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Take care. And let me just thank Roses Are Red. Thank you very much for that. Thanks, everyone, for your super chats, for your comments, and I'll see you guys next time. What book? It'll be a book on Elvis, but also a couple of other books as well. Okay. I hope a lot of you will join us for that. It should be good. Take care, guys. See you next time. Timmy, you want to go for a walk? Go for a walk. Okay. See you.